the corporate tax cut is actually paying for itself. You remember there was a lot of hullabaloo over the corporate tax cut and how it's going to drive the deficit through the ceiling and the debt through the ceiling, and it's Armageddon, and pretty much every Democrat turned into a fiscal conservative for a wee couple of seconds because God forbid you would actually borrow money to increase the debt to stimulate the economy. They would much prefer to throw that money at those shovel-ready jobs.
They want to print it.
Okay, the corporate tax, I'm going to get to that, but also this is stuff that you need to address. Most Americans have zero saved for retirement. The National Institute for Retirement Security, zero. And then the headlines, risky market by one measure, U.S. stocks 50% pricier than at the 2000 top. It's more expensive today than it was at the top of the market in the year 2000.
Wow.
A true bear market is really nowhere to be seen. So says veteran bull Rich Bernstein. Who are we to believe? But I start with this Steve Moore article. It was really, really well done. I actually saw the presentation. You may have as well, that Kevin Hassett, the chairman of the Trump Council on Economic Advisors, gave on this topic. And I was impressed with him, by the way. But here's what Stephen Moore, who you would assume, I think he's from the Heritage Foundation, would be a tad more objective than somebody from within the Trump administration. Although I think that Moore was on one of those committees once upon a time, so he probably leans right. Nonetheless, here's what he said. Compare the August 2018 economic forecast from the Congressional Budget Office with one from June 2017, before the tax cuts passed. And we discover some very good news. The much higher than expected economic growth in the wake of the Trump tax cuts means that U.S. gross domestic product will be higher than expected every year over the next decade. Every year over the next decade, better than the dismal performance we saw under the last administration that is still taking credit for what Trump did. No, it was the tax cuts that really did this and the change in regulations. And Hassett, in his presentation, demonstrated that with two graphs. He showed one graph going down. That was the trend line under Obama. And one graph going up, and that's been the last 2 years under Trump. But I digress. I'm not an economist. Steve Moore is. Okay, here we go. Even if we assume, he says, a reversion to the pre-Trump 1.9% growth path. Remember that new normal?
Yes.
That was the new normal. 1.9. The ratchet up in GDP this year translates into $179 billion in unexpected output this year, $465 billion next year, $654 billion in 2020, and so on. This magic of compounding yields more than $6 trillion in additional GDP over the decade, thanks to faster growth that's already been achieved. In other words, we've already taken a bite out of the Social Security thing. Remember, and I'll be the first one to criticize myself if there is criticism due.